Last year, most Canadians unwittingly supported brands repeatedly convicted of animal cruelty. These are brands whose chicken ends up on family tables across the country. Behind the billion-dollar industry, over 700 million birds are killed annually in conditions so shocking that judges have called them a test of national morality. What is really happening inside the slaughterhouses that supply your local grocery store? And why have fines and probation failed to stop the abuse? Here is what the chicken industry is hiding, and the 5 names you need to know before your next grocery trip. Maple Lodge Farm stands at the top of Canada's chicken industry, processing close to 500,000 birds every working day. Yet behind this scale lies a record that reads more like a rap sheet than a business profile. In the winter of 2008 and 2009, over 2,000 chickens froze to death during 2 transport runs to the company's Ontario slaughterhouse. Court records describe birds found dead from hypothermia, many frozen to the metal cages themselves. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency charged Maple Lodge with failing to protect animals in transit, resulting in a total of 20 convictions under the Health of Animals Act. In June 2013, Maple Lodge pleaded guilty to all counts. The court imposed an $80,000 fine and placed the company on a 3-year probation. The judge ordered Maple Lodge to invest $1 million over 3 years to overhaul its transport system, modifying trailers, updating weather protocols, and publishing data on dead-on-arrival rates. The sentencing judge stated, "Much can be ascertained about a civilized country by the way its animals are treated." For a company of this size, the fine and remedial order were intended as a warning shot, not just a cost of doing business. Yet while still under probation, Maple Lodge was fined again, $6,000, after 860 more hens froze to death in 2013. Animal law advocates and federal records confirm that Maple Lodge has been cited repeatedly for animal welfare violations, earning a reputation as a repeat offender. Each case points to the same pattern: economic priorities outweighing animal welfare, with penalties that rarely exceed the price of a single day's production. The company's response has often been to point at industry standards and promise improvements. But hidden camera footage and inspection reports tell a different story, one where suffering continues in the shadows, and fines are absorbed as routine business expenses. The legal record shows not a single shocking event, but a system where even Canada's largest processor can rack up convictions and keep operating without real consequence. In 2017, a hidden camera investigation exposed the brutal reality inside Canada's chicken supply chain. An undercover worker hired by Elite Farm Services joined crews tasked with catching chickens for Lilydale, a Sofina Foods brand, at more than a dozen factory farms across British Columbia. The footage captured workers kicking, throwing, and dropping birds, sometimes hurling them like bowling balls across barn floors. Some chickens were swung by their wings or legs, stepped on or crushed under boots. The violence did not stop at rough handling. Cameras recorded workers simulating sex acts with chickens, and one worker attempted to rip a live bird in half with his bare hands. The scale of the abuse forced authorities to act. In 2018, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency filed 38 charges under the Health of Animals Act. Both Elite Farm Services and Sofina Foods faced the courts. By December 2021, each company pleaded guilty to 2 counts of unlawfully loading chickens in a way likely to cause injury or undue suffering. The court imposed fines of $300,000 on both companies and placed them on 3 years probation. The judge found that workers had shown utter disregard for animal welfare. Probation orders required better employee training and third-party audits, but the rest of the charges were stayed. The case revealed more than just individual cruelty. Elite Farm Services worked as a contractor, hired to supply the labor that keeps chicken factories running. Outsourcing did not shield the parent company from responsibility. Sofina Foods, headquartered in Markham, Ontario, owns Lilydale and controls a growing share of Canada's poultry market. Not long after the conviction, Sofina moved to acquire Quebec cooperative Exceldor, further expanding its reach. The aftermath left a clear message in the court record. When cruelty is embedded in the system, fines and training sessions alone cannot guarantee change. As Sofina consolidates control, the risk grows that animal welfare problems will become even harder to see and even harder to stop. Canadian surveillance scientists track the drugs used in animal farming with the same precision as human hospitals. In 2014, producers across the country purchased 1.5 million kilograms of medically important antimicrobials for use in food animals. That is more than the total weight of all the chickens in a large processing plant on a busy day. Most of these drugs are not given to sick birds. They are mixed into feed or water for entire flocks to prevent disease or to promote faster growth. The Canadian Integrated Program for Antimicrobial Resistance Surveillance, CFIA, collects samples from farms, slaughterhouses, and grocery stores. Their data reveals a troubling pattern. In some years, up to 24% of Campylobacter bacteria isolated from chicken are resistant to ciprofloxacin, a drug doctors rely on to treat serious food poisoning. Resistance to tetracycline, another common antibiotic, appears in as much as 77% of chicken samples. Salmonella Kentucky, a strain detected in both poultry and people, now shows multi-drug resistance in 93% of tested samples. This is a warning sign for public health. These numbers are not just abstract statistics. Every percentage point represents bacteria that can survive the drugs meant to kill them. When resistant strains move from barns to processing plants, and finally to kitchen tables, the risk does not stay on the farm. The data from CFIA draws a direct line between the scale of drug use in Canadian chicken production and the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria on the meat Canadians eat. The consequences reach far beyond the barn door. AIR inside and outside Canadian chicken barns carries more than just the smell of ammonia and feathers. Environmental microbiologists have detected antibiotic-resistant bacteria in air samples collected both within poultry barns and downwind from their ventilation systems. These findings confirm that resistant microbes do not stay contained. They travel on dust and aerosols, drifting beyond barn walls and into the surrounding environment. Researchers have isolated strains of bacteria from barn air that can survive doses of antibiotics once considered reliable. Some of these same resistance genes appear in bacteria found on retail chicken, in abattoirs, and in human infections. Despite mounting evidence, Canadian policy has lagged behind the science. The first significant change came in 2014, when Health Canada and the poultry industry eliminated preventive use of Category 1 antibiotics, the drugs most critical for treating serious human infections. 4 years later, in 2018, the ban expanded to include Category 2 antibiotics. Yet even now, preventive use of Category 3 and Category 4 antibiotics continues, leaving a reservoir of resistance in the system. Industry representatives point to improved biosecurity and ventilation filters, but scientists warn that every additional pathway, whether meat, air, or water, adds to the risk of resistance spreading. The World Health Organization has called antimicrobial resistance one of the greatest threats to global health, citing misuse in agriculture as a key driver. In Canada, the partial bans have reduced some drug use, but the continued reliance on preventive antibiotics and the proven escape of resistant bacteria into the environment reveal a gap between policy and public safety. Resistant bacteria do not respect farm boundaries, and neither do the consequences. Federal scientists spent 3 years collecting samples from chicken farms and slaughterhouses across Canada. Their goal was to find out just how common dangerous bacteria are in the country's chicken supply. The results, published by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, were unsettling. Nearly half, 46%, of broiler chickens tested on farms carried salmonella. At the top of the breeding pyramid, Campylobacter was even more widespread, found in 73% of broiler breeder samples. These bacteria are not rare outliers. They are a routine part of the industrial chicken system, present before the birds even leave the barn. Microbiologists who study these pathogens warn that such high contamination rates raise the risk of exposure at every step, from farm to processing plant to kitchen counter. The numbers come from thousands of samples collected between 2018 and 2021, covering a mix of major production regions and company supply chains. Each positive test represents a potential pathway for infection, whether through cross-contamination during processing or improper handling at home. Federal surveillance programs like CFIA and FoodNet Canada confirm that Salmonella and Campylobacter are not just farm problems. Both have been detected repeatedly on retail chicken products in stores nationwide. These findings explain why public health officials urge strict kitchen hygiene and thorough cooking for all raw chicken. But the sheer scale of on-farm contamination makes clear that the risk begins long before the meat reaches the supermarket shelf. In early 2024, a popular brand of pizza-flavored chicken nuggets was pulled from supermarket shelves across Canada. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency found pieces of plastic in the product, hard, sharp fragments that could injure anyone who bit down. Just weeks later, a recall notice went out for Al Safa brand chicken kebabs after tests confirmed the presence of Listeria monocytogenes. This bacterium poses a serious risk to pregnant people, the elderly, and those with compromised immune systems. For both cases, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency online recall database became the first warning many families received that something was wrong with their food. These are not isolated incidents. Chicken products are among the most frequently recalled foods in Canada, with hazards ranging from foreign objects to dangerous bacteria. Behind each recall is a chain of events: mechanical failures, missed inspections, or lapses in sanitation that allowed contaminated or unsafe products to reach stores. Food safety officials are tasked with tracing every step, issuing alerts, and removing tainted products as quickly as possible. But the reality is that recalls often come only after the product has been purchased, cooked, and eaten. Sanitation is the last defense in the processing plant. Most facilities use chlorine-based rinses to kill bacteria on raw chicken, but research shows that some bacteria can survive repeated exposure, developing a tolerance to chlorine itself. Laboratory studies have found that these chlorine-tolerant strains sometimes also resist antibiotics, making them even harder to eliminate. When sanitizer levels are not carefully managed, the processing line can become a place where the most resilient bacteria survive. The result is that families may be exposed to pathogens that are not only present, but increasingly difficult to control with standard methods. In the end, the risk does not stay in the factory. It travels home, hidden in a product that looks perfectly safe. Supermarket chicken labels promise peace of mind, but the language on those packages rarely matches the reality behind the barn doors. Raised without antibiotics appears on more shelves every year. According to Canadian Food Inspection Agency guidelines, this claim means the chicken was not given antibiotics from hatch to slaughter, but the fine print allows exceptions. If a bird gets sick and needs antibiotics, that bird is removed from the Raised Without Antibiotics program, and yet the rest of the flock may still be sold under that label. Other drugs, like anticoccidials, can be used without disqualifying the claim, leaving room for confusion about what is actually in your food. Free-run and free-range labels sound like a promise of open fields. But in Canada, free-run simply means chickens are uncaged inside a barn. They never set foot outdoors. Free-range requires some access to the outdoors, but the rules do not say how much space, how often, or for how long. In much of the country, outdoor access is limited by weather and may last just a few weeks each year. Research shows many shoppers believe these terms mean more freedom than they actually provide. The No Added Hormones badge is another common sight. Growth hormones in poultry have been banned in Canada since the 1960s. Every chicken, regardless of brand, is raised without added hormones by law. The claim is a marketing tactic, not a meaningful distinction. The natural label is even broader. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency permits the word natural as long as the product contains no artificial ingredients or added colors and is only minimally processed. That label says nothing about how the chicken was raised, what it ate, or the conditions it endured. These labels are governed by federal rules, but the standards often leave wide gaps between what consumers imagine and what is actually guaranteed. The language on the package can shape choices at the checkout, but it rarely tells the full story of how that chicken lived or died. Canadian chicken suppliers often point to third-party certifications as proof of responsible practices. These programs, advertised on packaging and websites, promise regular audits and compliance with animal welfare codes. Yet the reality behind these badges is far less reassuring. Mercy for Animals and other advocacy groups have conducted 13 undercover investigations at Canadian poultry operations, including facilities proudly displaying certification seals. In every single case, investigators documented serious animal suffering or outright cruelty, no exceptions. The pattern is consistent. Barns and slaughterhouses pass scheduled audits, then hidden cameras capture workers abusing birds, leaving injured animals untreated or ignoring basic welfare standards. In one investigation, a certified facility was found with birds suffering from untreated injuries and workers handling animals with open disregard. Another audit-approved plant was exposed for allowing overcrowding so severe that birds were unable to reach food or water. These are not isolated lapses, but repeated failures occurring under the supposed watch of independent oversight. NGO reports comparing audit records to investigative findings reveal a clear gap. Auditors often rely on announced visits, checklists, and company-provided documentation. Meanwhile, undercover staff hired as regular workers witness daily violations that never make it into official reports. Certification bodies rarely revoke approval, even after public scandals. The result is a system where companies can advertise their compliance, but the actual conditions remain hidden. All 13 Canadian undercover poultry investigations to date have documented abuse, regardless of the farm or processor's certification status. This record exposes the limits of voluntary auditing. Badges and seals cannot replace real, unannounced oversight. When every investigation finds suffering behind certified doors, it is not the exceptions that matter, it is the rule. The accountability gap leaves consumers with little more than empty promises, while the same brands continue to supply grocery stores across the country. Canadian chicken is no longer just a question of taste or price. It is a public health issue and an ethical crossroads. With antibiotic resistance rising and animal cruelty convictions accumulating, every purchase shapes the future of food standards. The next decision sits in your hands, not the industry's. What happens next depends on whether we keep looking the other way. Let us know your thoughts below.